How do I start this thing?
Have you plugged the bloody USB in?
Yeah, it's in.
Nah, man, that's the wrong port. Oh, wait, it's flashing now.
It's recording.
Well, let's start this thing, fool.
Hello, everyone. I'm Amelia.
Hi, I'm Sam. Welcome to Ask the Duo podcast, a podcast where we get deep into those late-night, unfiltered conversations.
We'll be discussing all things lifestyle, relationship, mindset, and more.
All right, let's get to it. Hello, welcome
back, people. So we have a special one today. It's going to get a little deep, but we are talking about relationships and happily ever after. With most of us growing up, we've watched movies like Disney, rom-coms, like any typical love stories, and the perception is when you get into a love relationship, it's always a happily ever after. Well, that's the expectation anyway, right?
Yep.
But it's not always the case in reality. Sometimes relationships don't work out, and it might not be, it's not always a bad thing. Like I feel like there's a negative connotation to it. Like
it's a misconception, right? It's always like, when you get married, it's like, that's it. You're set.
Yeah.
But the reality is everyone's different. Relationships are always going to chop and change. So
yeah,
things may never be 100%.
Yeah, and even I think that from the traditional side of things, the perception is you need to stay in that marriage. But I think in this modern day and age, it's okay that you guys are different people and things don't work out.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, so This is why we brought in a very special person, my friend from high school, Jaz.
Hello.
So she's been through both a marriage and also a divorce, which we think would be really good for her to just share her story and just help other people who may be going through similar thoughts or similar experiences and just talk us through that.
Sounds good.
Yeah, get you to introduce yourself and let people know a bit about Jaz.
Yeah, sounds good. So, Jaz, I've actually known Amelia from high school, as she said, and 31 now. And yeah, I've lived in Brisbane all my life. I was born in New Zealand and migrated to Australia when I was 5, 6. And yeah, pretty much Australia is where I've really been born and, raised all my life. But in terms of, I guess, the relationship and marriage part, my marriage to the person who I was with, that was my first ever relationship.
Oh, yeah.
And I'd known him since uni days. So we met when I was 18 years old and we pretty much jumped into a relationship 1 month after, knowing each other. Fresh. And I always just thought that he'd be the one and only person in my life. That was what was going into. When we got married, I thought this was the person who I was going to spend the rest of my life with. And I guess, sadly, that's not what it ended up being. And just the journey from, getting into a relationship, getting married, it was really difficult. It was an emotional roller coaster for me.
Yeah, and even for me when I knew you, because I didn't actually know you in high school. We didn't really talk as much. Only the last few years we started to talk a bit more. But as we were saying off the podcast as well, you didn't really share too much about that relationship as well. It was more very conservative and
That's
all that.
Right. Yeah.
And with your cultural background, was that because it's a cultural thing that it wasn't shared as much?
Yeah, so definitely a lot of the cultural aspect came into play. So, jumping into a relationship at 18, I had told my parents almost immediately. I hated hiding things from them. And my dad was always strict. Even just growing up, I couldn't go to parties, sleepovers were a no. It was just very difficult for me growing up, having that normal lifestyle that any other kid in high school would have. So I had to tell him, because if I lied to him and he found out from somewhere else, he'd be really angry. So it was a difficult conversation. I told him that there was a guy that I met at uni. I'm seeing him. We both like each other. And he actually wanted to get to know the family straight away.
His family?
His family, yeah.
Wow.
And, his conversation with me and my ex, like throughout the 7 years in dating was, lay low, don't do things public. We don't want this going out in the Indian community. It taints your image of you looking promiscuous. It taints our image. And I get that. Like, he's from a different generation, and I wanted to be respectful. And if that's what he wanted, then, I'd listen to him, and I was happy to do it. But it just meant that we couldn't do the normal couple things that other people do, like go on a date, go for dinner dates, go to the movies. A lot of it was just sneaky hiding, even at uni.
Like a celebrity.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
It
It felt a little stressful, that part, just doing all of that for 7 years.
That's a
Damn.
long time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it just really sucked that I couldn't tell people about it openly, about my relationship. Like, very close friends and even like family, I just couldn't be open about it. And yeah, like, so in uni, if we'd go together to like classes, you'd see some Indians maybe just like looking at us, and we had an instance where one girl followed us for like a kilometer.
Oh my God.
Stalking.
What the hell?
Yeah.
Stalking.
But did you know this girl or no?
I knew her sort of,
Yeah.
like just through like another
Class or
person.
something. Yeah.
And apparently she went to the group of her friends and was like, oh, they're definitely dating. I, walked and followed them for like a kilometer.
Oh my God.
That's so
Paparazzi.
It's crazy. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that made me feel really uncomfortable too.
So in the Indian cultural perspective, so you're not meant to show that you're dating, or is it that you need to get married to be able to date? Like, what's the background?
It's a tricky one. So, like, there are families that are really open and comfortable about like their kids dating. My dad wasn't like that. He was very conservative about that. He thought that if we were open about our relationship, people would talk, and he didn't want that kind of negative talk coming back to him. For him, it's just sort of like a humiliation thing.
Right.
We have to think about honor and our image. So it was just something that he was not comfortable if we went open and public about it. Yeah.
Interesting, but that's also really, really hard to.
Oh, yeah, 7 years. And I think that was one of the challenges when we were dating. And then the other one would have to be the long distance. We did do long distance for close to a year. So I was still studying, and he decided to return to New South Wales, where his family is from, and just help out with the family business. So a lot of our communication was, phone calls, video chat, and we just didn't see each other for that long. And that really strained the relationship.
Yeah.
I thought we could work through it, but, he's in a different town, I'm here, and yeah, that really strained the relationship to the point we were at breaking point. And yeah, there was just like a time where he went with his friends overseas to America for like 3 weeks, and in that 3 weeks I hadn't been in contact with him for 2 weeks. And yeah, like my mind was just going crazy. Like, what is he doing? Yeah, like, what is he doing? Is he cheating on me? Why hasn't he contacted me? Is he okay? Is he safe? So I had momentarily broken up with him for, I'd say maybe like 1-2 weeks. It was a very short breakup.
While he was over there?
Yeah, while he was over there. And
is that the first time where he didn't talk to you for 3 weeks, or has he done that before?
He's done that before, actually. Yeah, so there was another trip he'd made to Europe, and they went to Ibiza, and I just didn't get much contact from him when he was there. And I mean, it's a party central place, so I just didn't really know what to expect. You know, them going overseas and half of his friends are single already. Again, it just strains the relationship and makes me question, you know, whether this is worth it. So I had a few doubts and red flags already throughout just our dating and, you know, our relationship. But the cultural aspect really kind of puts pressure on you. So the idea that we're already in a relationship, I've already told my dad, I've vouched for this person. They think he's a really nice boy. They want it to make it work. All of that also plays a part in, you know, having to stay with this person. And I'm not trying to fault my parents on this, but it plays a part because I had like low self-esteem and self-worth. So for me, I just thought this is as good as it's going to get. You know, this is what a relationship is supposed to look like. It's supposed to have ups and downs, and no one's going to love me more than this person. So those were also thoughts that I had.
Yeah, and plus upholding the respect for your parents and the culture and all that.
Yeah.
Like it's just
That's
all
right.
that stuff coming in.
All that pressure. Yeah.
Yeah, that combination of all of that made me realize that maybe I should just stay with him and get married. Like that's probably the best decision. And hopefully that party lifestyle will diminish when we get married. You know, he'd stop, you know, going out so much with the boys. He'd, you know, stop going out and drinking. And I just had that belief that he'd settle down and actually really commit to the relationship and marriage.
Yeah, and I
Yeah.
find that actually is really common in a lot of relationships. It's like, it doesn't always have to be the female, but I feel like it's common in the female to think that, oh, the guy's going to settle, or like if we
Yeah.
do this, they're going to change, or if we have a kid together, they're going to commit to the family and things like that. And I find that that's a really common thought.
Yeah.
For you to have to go through that, I think that's also a lot on you too.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, yeah, it was just a lot of pressure. And when you're planning a wedding, you start to think about the party stuff, you know, celebrating, get everything ready for that. But you're not really dwelling on whether this is the right person at that stage. So I think maybe 3 months before the actual wedding day, you know, I sat down with my mom. I actually remember we went to a cafe and I sat down and I just started crying because I'm like, you know, there's things that he's wanting, like he wants to go back to New South Wales and live a life there in a small town. And I'm like, this is all new to me now. Like I can't, you know, just drop everything, my career, you know, my family here and move there with him. And I'm like, I don't know if this is something I want to do. I don't know if he's the right person. I'm already having doubts. I'm questioning whether this is, you know, right for me. And she just told me, look, you need to have a conversation with him about it. And, you know, he's a really lovely boy. He's Indian. This is, you know, someone you spent a long time with. So it's not just anyone. And he's someone you should be going to and having that conversation. And we did have that conversation. We talked about that it could be a possibility. It's not something cement. So that kind of cleared it up, but that doubt never went away. That feeling of anxiousness and feeling insecure had always stayed throughout like my dating life and my marriage life. And to me, I always thought that was normal. Like I thought that's supposed to be in a relationship. You're supposed to feel like this. Yeah, it's definitely not.
Is that
Yeah.
because you've never had a relationship, so you didn't know what to expect and you felt like that's what would happen in a
Absolutely, yeah. I think that, and just a combination of, I feel like I have like an anxious attachment style. So, you know, I have that feeling of a fear of being abandoned. I have that feeling of low self-esteem and that no one's going to love me better. So all of that also plays a part. And I never really realized that that's probably the reason why I'm choosing to stay, and that there's, you know, a hidden reason. Instead, I'm just accepting it for what it is and that this is normal.
And it doesn't help
not.
if the other person wasn't really communicating either, or like
Exactly,
giving you
yeah.
the love that you need.
Yeah. And like, I just think that it's normal. Like if there is a relationship where one person is a party person and one is a homebody and that works, that's great. But that's something that I had a lot of difficulty and struggle with in the marriage.
I think it can work as long as the other person's like, hey, I'm going to come home late tonight, or like, hey, I'm staying out for a drink. But if someone just goes cold, go out and just doesn't come back till 5 o'clock or whatever time it is and say nothing and do that on a regular occasion, then that's kind of a red flag to me. But if they're like, this week I've got a dinner with colleagues, or like we're having a Christmas dinner with blah blah blah, like it's communicated and you have set that expectation. And if one person's like a homebody and someone's very extroverted, that can work. But if someone's just like, nah, I'm doing my own thing, see you later, and then come back at 5 o'clock, it's like, what the hell happened?
But there's got to be a fine balance too. Both parties need to be in the same page when it comes to like working together. And I think like communication added to that is obviously really important, but you need to spend that time with your significant half. If you know that you're going out all the time,
you got to compromise some way.
Yeah, you got to compromise in some way or form. Like you can't just keep partying fucking...
And be like, hey, these next 2 weeks I'm going to go out with my friends, but the week after let's go and, you know, do camping, or let's go watch a movie or something like that, where it's like showing you that they still think of you.
And I think that a lot of that was lacking in our marriage. I think that we jumped into a marriage quite young and I was naive. And we didn't really talk about those things. We didn't have those open discussions and have that communication about being transparent about what we're doing. We didn't compromise or come to a middle point. And I think all of that could easily be seen in the first year of our marriage, where I wasn't happy with how his lifestyle was and my lifestyle was. And we weren't merging our lifestyles to a point where we both understand what we want and what we don't want. So like when I did get married to him, it was the first time living with him, because in Indian culture, the girl lives with their parents. That's just the culture, and then they're expected to live with their husband after marriage. So the first few months was just understanding our lifestyle and our living habits. But after that, you know, the partying and going out was just something that was very common. Like I'd see it every weekend. He'd be out drinking with the boys and doing his own thing, and I'm a homebody and I like staying at home. I don't really want to spend my money on all of that stuff. I'd rather just stay at home and save that. And there was just no balance there. Then the weekends became sort of like some days during the week, and you know, I'm going out for a social event with work and coming back at like 11:30 or 3:30 in the morning, and it just became so common to the point where I'd hardly see him, and it just felt like roommates than actually a married couple. Exactly. So I got, I guess, pretty lonely maybe after 6, maybe even after 5 months in the marriage. I felt very lonely. I felt very upset. And I just didn't really pin it down to it being because of us being married. I just thought it was the stress of work and using that as an excuse. So I'd stay at work deliberately. It's a government job, so usually you wrap up around 5, 6. That's the norm. But I was working from like 7 in the morning till like 7 p.m. sometimes. And even my boss was like, you need to stop doing that. And I'm like, I just want to stay. I don't mind just putting the wrong hours in. Just, can I stay back?
Like your body was in a bit of denial and you didn't want to accept that there's something wrong outside of that.
I think so, I think deep down I knew what it was, but I didn't want to accept it. And when I'd come home, I'd just go for a long walk, sometimes for 2 hours, sometimes for a long walk. And I'd just cry. For those I'd sit out by the river, and sometimes I'd just sit there for an hour, and I would cry, and I wouldn't know why, and I just felt like I was depressed. So I reached out for help. I sought out a therapist, and I talked about how I was feeling, what was going through in my life, and what my living arrangements were with my ex-husband at the time. So she immediately knew what exactly it was, and she kind of, I guess, revealed in a very comfortable and easy way that maybe it's your marriage that's, you know, you're not happy about, and these were the reasons why. And I mean, I knew deep down it was that, but having somebody else tell me that just kind of, I guess, confirmed that feeling that it's my marriage and I'm not happy. And she told me that, look, you have no kids, you don't have a mortgage, you need to sit down with your husband and tell him that you're not happy and that possibly divorce is something that you need to consider. And she said that you need to just rip off the Band-Aid and just do it. And, you know, it took maybe 3 days before I actually had that conversation with my husband, or ex-husband now. And I just sat him down and I said, look, I'm really unhappy and I just don't know if I can do this anymore. And I'm leaning towards ending this marriage. It was not taken well at all. It was not well received.
How did he take it?
I guess a part of him stonewalled me and the other half put the fault back on me.
Wow.
So yeah, like, oh, well, you don't do this around the house and you don't come out with me to social events and you always just want to stay at home and you're always sad and you need to exercise more if you feel sad, and that's probably why you
trying to make you guilty, like feel guilty.
Manipulation in a way too, like manipulating your thoughts and your feelings.
And my therapist brought that up too, that it just feels like he's manipulating your thoughts. And he just, I guess he walked out, he stormed out and just, I sat there and I was kind of like, oh, maybe it is my fault. You know, I'm not doing this and I'm not doing that, and maybe I should take accountability for my own actions. So I thought, you know, maybe I should try to make this work. And I was just really upset at that time. And I think it was that night, it was 2 days later, we had a fight and he had gone out all night. Wow. I didn't hear from him. I had to actually call up his parents and be like, I don't know where he is. I don't know what to do. Can you please give him a call because he's not answering my phone?
Far out.
And he ended up coming back at 4, and it was a side to me that I had actually never seen. It was like a side where I was crying and I was screaming, and it was like all of this pent up energy that I've like had for 10 months and it just all came out, and he just stood there and he's just like, I'm like, please, can you I'm closing the door on you. I don't want to see you because I'm really upset. And he wouldn't let me close the door. And he just stood there and I just started screaming. And I'm like, please, like. God. I just ended up closing the door and he just had no expression on his face. And
like he didn't even care at all.
He didn't care at all. Like he had no empathy. He showed just, there was no emotion on his face. And the next day after work, I started packing my bag and I was like, I'm just going to go to my mum and dad's. And that's when he stopped me and he's like, I'm sorry and I just don't know how else to care for you and, you know, I'll do better. And we had a Vietnam trip lined up like a month from then. So he's like, let's try to make it work while we're on a holiday. And I tried. Like, you know, I went in openly and, you know, in the back of my head, I was just like, I'm still having doubts. I'm still feeling really upset. I'm still feeling the way I'm feeling. And still nothing had changed. He still had that, you know, that party lifestyle continuing. And yeah, I think the next step after that was, I thought if we bought a house, maybe that would help with him committing more. And that's how I felt when, you know, getting married, that if we got married, he'd settle down, he'd compromise. He didn't. We bought the house thinking that, all right, he's going to commit. He's But he was out every weekend. He was out. He didn't change, no.
Yeah, I think unless you really go through to the root of the problem, no matter what you do outside of that, it'll be hard to change the relationship because you have to actually face the problem itself before you can even get other things to try and fix it. Like going on holidays is, you'll have a fun time, but the problem's still there.
Still on the back. Yeah.
You're not tackling the issue head on. Because obviously you'll be in denial stage initially, but it's accepting the issue after that, and that's the hard part to get to. Yeah, it's facing those problems, right? So I think that it seemed like he was avoiding everything. Yeah, because he was in denial at the same time.
Yeah,
it seemed like he obviously knew that there was problems, but he just didn't want to face it.
And he just that's the problem. He just kept sweeping it under the rug. And I mean, I'm at fault too in that I could have communicated a bit more openly, and I could have opened these conversations earlier. Like as soon as I saw it, instead of just bottling it up inside, I should have been having those conversations with him. So that's where I could have probably done better.
Yeah, no, I'm the same too. Like sometimes because you want to make sure that you're not just being irrational and be like, it's wrong, or you want to think about it, but then sometimes you think about it for too long, or you self-doubt your own thoughts that you bottle up, and then it kind of just goes over for a long time. Then you're like, I should have said something about this. Yeah, so I'm exactly the same.
Oh, yeah. And it's not an easy conversation. Like sometimes you just don't want to hurt the other person and you don't expect how they're going to feel is, the reaction you're expecting. So for me, I'm not a confrontational person. It's not easy for me to have those conversations. I would probably rather try to fix it without having to have that conversation, and the reality is you can't do that.
You need to have these, like, it might be a bit confronting, but it's better to be straightforward than to do things and walk around the
beat around
the bush, and then the other person may not receive the same message that you're trying to show them.
Yeah, that is a really important thing to highlight, right? It's just in any relationship, communication's got to be there 100%. Because, like without communicating, I can't read what you're feeling just by looking at your face. You know what I mean? Like you have to tell that person how you're feeling at that point in time, and vice versa.
And especially because you guys lived apart, you guys had long distance, so you weren't living together. All that is a learning curve, and then suddenly living together and still didn't build that communication from ground up. That's really difficult.
That's like a fresh relationship, basically. Living together, like, and I think adding to the fact that the culture of trying to be secretive and
can't go on a date.
You guys couldn't develop your relationship. Everything was combined together. That sort of self for life, guys. But like those things combined, it added to the result. So.
But I wanted to also know a little bit more about the cultural side of things. When you had to go through a divorce, were there any cultural pressures? Because I know in Asian culture in general, just getting married and then the divorce, like what we were saying at the start, that it has a very negative side. Like people would view that you failed in marriage and all that kind of stuff. Was that any of those pressure that you had?
100%. Very, very similar, if not the same. With divorce, I think it's changing though, but the impression is that it's a taboo. It's a stigma attached to you. You're labeled and identified as the divorcee. And for me, that was also one of the reasons what made it difficult to get the divorce. I didn't want to make anyone unhappy. I didn't want to hurt my family. I didn't want to hurt his family. And that's actually one of the reasons what prolonged, me deciding to finally, leave the marriage. When I had to tell my parents about the divorce and that I've separated from my ex, it was probably one of the most difficult conversations I've ever had. Simply because I just didn't want to break their hearts. And just the look on their face, you could just see how much hurt they had.
I can feel that. I can just imagine what that would be like, because I would be like the same, like the parents is looking either disappointed or be like, how am I going to go out now? Like the community is going to look at you.
It's all about the face.
Way.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think it was more of a shock for them because I never really spoke about my marriage really to them or anyone. Like, I never told them what was happening, inside and how unhappy I was. So for them, it was really foreign and new to them that I was feeling like this and that I wanted to leave. And they thought that it was an irrational, impulsive decision, something that was just me upset about something and an overnight decision, when it was something that I've been thinking about for years.
Because you even questioned it before, the 3 months before you got married. You were talking
absolutely.
to your mom, so that was something that was an ongoing thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And they just thought that, like, look, they seem happy. She's always smiling when she's at the house when I come visit my parents' place, but they never really suspected it to be this bad. I did make the comment one time that I feel like we're roommates than actually a married couple, and that kind of concerned my dad, but he never really considered it to be so bad to the point that I wanted a divorce. So they really encouraged me to do marriage counseling with my ex, and I just refused to do it. I didn't want to do it because at that point I was like, there's no point. I've already made a decision. He's not really working things out, and he's only now trying to make effort because his parents have, involved themselves. And they just continued on with just, give it a go, just at least once, and you can't come home until you've sorted it out.
Wow.
Yeah. But the thing is, they don't know what happened. I didn't tell them every single detail in our marriage of what happened. And so I did the marriage counseling. Like, I went into that session, and when the therapist asked, where do you see yourself with this marriage? I said, look, I'm ready to get a divorce. I'm not willing to. Different one. Yeah. This was one that he made an appointment with. So I just ran along with it, and I just flat out said, I don't trust him. I'm not happy. I can no longer be in a marriage with this person. And look, it really hurt for him. You could just tell from his face, he didn't like hearing any of that. He looked really upset, and it was really difficult for him to hear what I was saying. And I think that's when he realized.
Is that the first time that he heard that straightforwardness from you?
Yes. And I don't think he was expecting any of that. And the therapist just straight up said that there's no point continuing on with this session, because if one person's already at this point, they're not coming back.
Yeah, you can't save them. They already made a decision.
Because you've already decided, and it would have been a thing that you've thought about for such a long time too.
Yeah, and she knew it. That therapist knew it. She's like, there's no point continuing on. And she's like, it's up to you if you want to pay for the session or not. But, I really don't know what else to talk to you guys about. Yeah.
Damn.
But I think it's really good that you actually, like, not the marriage counsel, but you even sought out a counselor or therapist when you were feeling down. I think that's really good, because not a lot of people would actually think of that. They just think something's wrong, or like they just sweep under the rug or just continue on. Whereas you were feeling a certain way and you didn't know how you were feeling or why you were feeling that, but at least you went to seek out help. Because I think another stigma is that seeing a therapist is a bad thing, like you're crazy or like something's wrong with you, but it's not the case. Like, if there's something wrong, these people are professional people who can talk through your feelings. So I think it's really good that you did that.
Oh, absolutely. And I'm so glad I did, because had I not seen her, she would not have put to light that the issue is your marriage. This is what's causing you sadness. This is what's causing you to feel depressed. And I'm just really glad that I sought out a therapist then. And even during my separation, I had a therapist for, I'd say, a year. Yeah, it wasn't a very good healing process for me. So having that therapist there and just, decluttering my thoughts and my mind and how I'm feeling, and having someone to just verify how I'm feeling and what, techniques I need to get through it, really helped a lot.
And to truly listen, because it feels like for the past even 10 years or however long, like 7 to 8 years, you didn't have someone to actually listen to you. No. So I think that was really good for you to have someone there to validate your thoughts and listen and not judge you at all for anything.
Yes.
Yeah, that's 7 years of bottling up relationship problems, you know what I mean? Like just the things that you're going through. Yeah. And to have someone sit there and actually listen to you. But not just that, but identify, like you said, certain strategies that you can take on to help you improve or to release that, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah. And even because you couldn't talk to your parents about it, so you would have gone through it alone for a long time.
Yeah, and keeping it a secret too, man.
Yeah.
Like everything. So you're just like having all these things piling up behind you and inside and just...
Doing it alone, that's the
hardest part. Like I virtually told no one about the inside of like our marriage and what I was experiencing. And I think that if I just told one friend or one family member, they would have just told me to leave.
Yeah.
100%. Even fucking hearing it, I'm just like, dude, get the fuck out of here, like straight up.
That's a big no-no.
Yeah.
Would you say that finding that therapist during your breakup or your divorce, that's how you found yourself again, or?
I think that the therapist is there to give you, help and support and tell you, techniques to cope with it. But at the end of the day, it really comes down to you. Yeah. So when I got separated, I immediately started, seeking out help with a therapist. But I didn't start the healing process until maybe 2020, late 2020. So I separated in 2019. I didn't start the healing process until 2020 late. And the reason being is I felt very numb throughout the whole process. I felt very indifferent at times. And I started to take on destructive behavior. So just excessive drinking.
Wow.
I'd go out just so that I could shut my thoughts, not think about the whole marriage, the failure that I felt like I was a failure the whole time. I actually really hated myself. And I even told my parents that, like, I hate myself and I feel like a failure. And it was gut-wrenching just to see their faces and how I felt.
Yeah, that's really sad for anyone to feel that way.
Yeah, like, so 1 year of that, I jumped into dating really quickly, thinking that that's probably a quick solve. So I did traveling. The traveling was nice. Like it helped me explore myself, but that doesn't mean that you're going to heal from it. It's just something that's going to help you find yourself better, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to help with the healing. And then I just finally got to a point, which was at the end of 2020, where I'm like, I can't solve this from excessive drinking. I can't solve this from going out. I can't solve this with, spending as much time as I can with family and friends or going traveling. I need to actually sit down with myself, with my thoughts, and feel what I feel.
Yeah.
And journaling helped a lot with that. And I even just sought out like a self-love workshop to help me understand myself better and why I feel what I feel. And that's when I truly accepted what it was and that it's no one's fault. And that's when I really truly started to value myself and love myself. Yeah, that's when I was finally at peace with the whole marriage breakdown and that it is what it is.
Yeah.
So when you say that it took you a year after talking to a therapist to start the healing process, what's the healing process? Is that you just actually journaling and thinking about it and sitting with your thoughts, like that kind of healing?
And grieving. Grieving is an important one because I didn't take time to grieve. I was very numb and indifferent throughout pretty much for the whole 2019. I didn't grieve, and I finally just sat down for days and just cried a lot and thought about the whole marriage and what happened and how it happened and just accepted that as well. But yeah, journaling helps. You sit down with your thoughts, you flesh out what's an irrational thought and what's a logical thought, and that thoughts are just sometimes just thoughts, and it's okay to have them.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah,
I actually read this the other day that I think a therapist or something was doing an experiment. It was like 10 people in a room, like a dark room, and I think it was like they pay you $1,000 or $10,000 if you can sit in there for 5 minutes to sit there and just listen to your own thoughts, or you can get out straight away by getting tasered. And I think 95%, I don't know if it's the right data, but 95% of people would rather get tasered than to sit there for 5 minutes and think about their own thoughts. And I'm just like, wow, that is crazy.
That's shocking.
Yeah, like they just don't want to sit with their own thoughts, which is, I can see why, because once you start sitting there like in total silence and just to think and let your thoughts come through, there are some really nasty things that come out of your mind.
Yeah, of course.
And to sit through that, it can be challenging if you don't know how to deal with your thoughts.
Yeah.
That'd be pretty scary though, sitting there.
Yeah.
But I think I'd try and endure it.
But it's like 5 minutes, but the people don't want to sit there for 5 minutes to hear their own thoughts. That's just crazy.
I would love to. I'd be like, let's go, mate.
$10,000 on the line.
Yeah, mate. It's all about those cash monies, brother, hey?
Well, we'll finish it off with, what's the 3 biggest takeaways that you think you can share with others from what you've learnt in this first relationship that you had?
I think one of them is, before you enter into anything serious with anyone, even just going into the dating world, know yourself, like have self-love, have self-worth, because if you know who yourself are, you're confident, you're beautiful, you value yourself, you're not going to just attract anyone into your life who's going to ever take advantage of that.
Yeah.
So I thought it's incredibly important to know who you are, what your worth is, and love yourself.
Yeah, I think that's really, really important.
Yeah. I think be kind to yourself. If you're going through a situation where, you're going through separation or you're having issues in a marriage, be kind to yourself. The thoughts I had were incredibly critical, incredibly harsh and hurtful. And, if you envision yourself saying that to a friend or a family member, you're like a bully. You're a mean person.
Yeah.
So that itself should apply to yourself when you're making comments like that. Be mindful about it. Yeah.
I heard something as well, like if you have these certain thoughts or critical thoughts, imagine that you had a child and you saying those things to them. Like, would you say those things? And that's how you think, are you being too critical to yourself? Which I think is a really good way to put it.
Yeah, like even your inner child, like how would they feel if you're saying things like you're a failure and, you don't deserve love? Yeah, no, I agree with that.
Yeah.
I think the third thing that I would take away from it is knowing when you want to be happy, like know what your happiness is. And sometimes that can come off as being selfish, but if you're not happy in a situation and you're trying to make everyone else happy, that's not fair on you, and you're going to be miserable in the long term. So you got to understand what makes you happy first and put yourself first in that sort of situation before putting others.
Yeah, I agree with that. And that's something that I had to learn over time too, because I think it's just our cultural thing that you have to consider others, your parents mainly, and your family, and how people view things. So you're always constantly putting others first, which is completely fine too, but you also have to put yourself first as well. When you know that you're not happy, you need to think about why that is, and not just try and do things for other people and just to make yourself look good. That cultural aspect. Yeah,
and I feel like that's the same like in the Indian culture is that vain show, like that, show that, I have this and I have a family and I have a happy life. But if you're constantly, putting up that show, how are you going to be happy?
You're so tired as well. Exactly. It's just so much energy.
It's fake. It's all about face.
Yeah.
No, these are really good. I think it was really good points for people who might be going through the same thing. So we really appreciate you sharing your story, because you have to be really courageous to share this kind of things too. So yeah, thank you for sharing.
No, that's all good. Thank you for having me.
What to add to that is you've done really well in terms of
I think you've done
especially
really well.
Where you were, right? Because you're saying your self-confidence was low, your self-esteem was just trash. And for the fact that you put yourself out there to seek the assistance is a massive thing. Most people don't do that, because when you're already in a deep hole, you generally stay in that deep hole.
That's right.
And it takes a lot to get someone out of there. So I commend the fact that you pretty much pulled yourself out of that alone, especially when you basically didn't talk to any of your friends.
Yeah. To realize that you do have a problem, and that not just realizing that, but to know that you need to do things to make yourself get out of it, like the drinking, the partying, like making yourself realize that that's not going to help. That's really good.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, really, really proud as a friend.
Yeah, man, that's fucking awesome. You're a very strong, independent woman, right?
You don't need no man. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you for sharing, and we'll leave it at that, and let us know if you guys have a similar experience, and we'd like to hear that as well.
Yeah, shoot us a DM if there's any questions or any topics you guys would like us to cover. And once again, please like and subscribe.
Bye, guys.
See you later. Thank you so much if you have reached to the end. We really appreciate you for tuning in. And if you'd like what you hear, please share it with your friends or family and subscribe to our podcast on whatever platform you are listening to.
Make sure you share any topics you'd like us to cover or questions you might have to our Instagram.
Slide it into our DMs.
Bigger. You can also stay in the loop of all the behind the scenes and the release of our new episodes there too. Our Instagram is Ask the Duo Podcast. That's AskTheDuopodcast. Man, feels like I'm in a spelling bee competition right now. Alright, that's it for now, and we'll see you back here for our next episode. Bye!
See ya!